Hey, how's it going, pop-up campers? Welcome back to It's Poppin', where we talk about everything pop-up camper related. So this video is going to be part two, the second part of our re-renovating or remodeling of our already renovated pop-up camper. So it's going to be the second and final part. We're going to finish up everything we set out to do in this video. So we're going to wrap up the Tmolding. We're going to finish up doing a lot of the countertopping, a little bit of painting here and there, and a little bit of caulking. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So now we've let the epoxy dry for actually well over 72 hours. Now that that's dry, we're going to move on to installing some of the Tmolding on these countertops. Now, as far as the Tmolding is concerned, make sure that you measure the width of the Tmolding if you're going to be replacing it with brand new stuff, because it does come in various widths. As far as putting the Tmolding on, we found that once we remove the original Tmolding, that channel that goes in, it's just not as tight and full of wood, and it doesn't hold on to the new Tmolding that we purchased. So what we're going to do essentially is adhere that in with some liquid nails all-purpose adhesive. And as far as getting your Tmolding to kind of mold around corners, there's a few tips and tricks we have for you guys. First off, you're going to want to, tape the start point for your Tmolding into place, and then that'll actually hold that in. If you're going to be going around some more subtle curves, so not 90-degree curves, if it's a nice rounded edge, we found that using or employing a heat gun, maybe a hair dryer if that's what you have, to heat up that plastic Tmolding to get it to adhere to the curve a little bit better really helped. And as you'll also see, for 90-degree corners, the best method, and also the method employed by Starcraft to put in the old Tmolding, is that they cut notches to allow that Tmolding to turn or bend at a 90. Also, as far as figuring out the length of your Tmolding, what we did is we utilized a fabric tape measure, so a nice pliable tape measure, and then we measured the length of the old trim of whatever piece you're working on was. And just kind of from trial and error, what we found out is that you might want to add maybe an inch extra. That way, when you have all your Tmolding in place, you don't come up short. And even if you have a little extra, you can then trim it off at the end.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
Alright guys, so our method as far as adhering the Tmolding down is pretty simple now that we have all of the Tmolding painters taped on. What we're doing is we're going at the opposite end of where our Tmolding comes and meets together. So we're going complete opposite side over here, and we're going to start gluing on this side one set at a time. So we'll take all of the painter's tape off this side, glue down this edge, re-adhere the painter's tape so that way our Tmolding sticks into where it needs to, and then we'll come over to the left side here, take off the painter's tape, put down the liquid nails adhesive, go all the way around, and then same thing, put the painter's tape back on, and then let it sit and dry with the painter's tape holding the Tmolding in.
Rays, and on we'll go through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
So now we've finished up doing the Tmolding on the countertops and tables. There's a few lessons that we learned from doing this for the first time. First off, we kind of wish we would have just thrown out the old Tmolding and then measured whatever area the Tmolding we were going to put on was, because we found from the factory that those pieces of Tmolding, the old ones at least, were either short or a little bit off. So we wish we'd have just gone off of the actual dimensions of what we're putting on. So learn from our lessons on that. And a few other things we learned when putting in the Tmolding were liberal amounts of the adhesive is really nice for making sure those stick where you want them to. And then of course using liberal amounts of painter's tape to actually press that Tmolding up into the channel. That was really helpful as well for us, especially in the corners. And speaking of the corners, we found that it really helped to notch out some of the corners that maybe even the factory didn't, to help that Tmolding go around those corners a little bit easier. So just a few things that we learned from making our own Tmolding for the first time. And now we're just gonna start putting everything back together, assembling everything, drilling out some of the holes that we accidentally got some epoxy in. So hopefully those turn out well, but just pretty smooth sailing from here on out.
And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And on we'll go through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
So we got everything reinstalled in the pop-up camper, like the sink, the stove, the table benches, some of the little trim pieces. So that's all screwed back in and in the camper where it's supposed to be. Now, because we did take the sink out, I'm gonna have to re-caulk around the edge of that with some waterproof caulking. So while I'm doing that, I'm also gonna hit that spot on the floor trim that's separated and just knock both of those out. So that's what's next. So the caulking's all done, and that was pretty much the final step. The wife, of course, did a little touch-up painting, but that was it. So let me show you around. Here, of course, is the main table, and I think it turned out really well. Now, of course, I think we did have a few bubbles in there, a few imperfections, but for the most part, it turned out really well. It's nice high gloss, and unlike the polyurethane, it gave it a nice even finish on all of the countertop surfaces that we did. Whereas unlike the poly, where we did I think 3 coats, you could still feel that textured spray paint coming through. So this looks absolutely incredible compared to the poly, and we think it turned out really well. There were a few imperfections here and there, like if you get it in the right light, you can see some bubbles and some spots that didn't get covered as evenly, but for the most part, we think it turned out really well, even though it is a bit of a pricier option compared to the poly, and perhaps a little bit more work intensive. It turned out really well. Same with the Tmolding. It's a little bit more intense in terms of the amount of work you need to put into it compared to the just repainting the old stuff, because you have to cut, trim, and of course mold all the new trim, but it's gonna hold up a lot better than that old trim. So we're really happy with the new white trim that we put on here as well. So as far as the cushions were concerned, we got some of that paint that came off of the cabinet and drawer pulls off with just some simple rubbing alcohol that cleaned up pretty nicely. Now, as far as the floor is concerned, and I just remember this today, but of course that's gonna be an oil-based paint. So it's gonna be requiring some heavier duty paint remover. So unfortunately, we won't be able to tackle that today. It'll just be another project when we get some better paint remover to clean those floors up. But all in all, that's it, and everything is done. So if you guys enjoyed this video, definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already. And then of course, like it. It helps YouTube promote this to other people who probably enjoy watching pop-up camper related content as well. So definitely like and subscribe. And as always, hopefully we see you in the next one. If not, hopefully we see you out there camping.